اللهم صل على أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon His holy Prophet Muhammad and the purified members of his household and progeny. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajahum. Respected sisters, dear brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you for joining us once again in our series in which we are trying to understand what is the Islamic blueprint for the acquisition of knowledge. We are in the 5th lecture in this series, and so today, inshallah, we are going to continue where we left off. We said that before we talk about specific types of knowledge that our religion instructs us to learn, there are general principles that our religion has given us that apply in general to any type of knowledge acquisition and that are useful for us to know. And so we have spent a little bit of time going through some of the important general principles for knowledge acquisition in Islam, and we focused on a few specifically, and inshallah we will provide a quick recap and reminder of what we have covered until now. Today, inshallah, we want to start moving towards the first type of knowledge that we are meant to focus on, and that is perhaps most obviously, most evidently, religious knowledge. And religious knowledge, as we mentioned already once, religious knowledge is going to fall in two big types or categories. The first type of religious knowledge has to do with the religious knowledge that we can call foundational, and it becomes our worldview. And today, inshallah, we're simply talking about that, along with a few other topics related to introducing what we are talking about when we talk about religious knowledge. And inshallah, starting next lecture, hoping that today we have enough time to cover everything we have on our agenda. Next lecture, inshallah, we are aiming to start in a little bit more detail on the specific types of religious knowledge that our religion instructs us to learn. So today, inshallah, we also want to talk about the categories of praxis meaning action and practical conduct and behavior that are the foundation for how we understand our behavior and Islamic law in general. So we see that this is going to be directly applicable to the discussion of knowledge. And inshallah, this will become a little bit clearer as we go through it. The second point is going to be related to what we have already mentioned, and today, inshallah, we're going to emphasize this, that all the types of knowledge that are non-religious, from our point of view, are still going to be on a foundation of religion. And that's why what we mean by saying that religious knowledge is always going to be intertwined with any other type of knowledge that we acquire. And this is how our religion presents knowledge. And we will see that, inshallah, today in a few examples. Finally, I think there's a discussion that is worth having, at least for a little bit of awareness. I don't plan to go into any amount of detail, but I think for these types of more in-depth discussions, it's good to know what is going on in general in the world of Islamic law, Islamic thinking, and scholarship, to see that this is a dynamic field, discipline, and that there's constantly new ways of looking at issues and problems and realities and trying to apply to them a higher level of accuracy, a higher level of relevance. So I want to talk a little bit about that today, inshallah. This slide, with way too many words on it, is meant to be a quick recap of what we have covered until now. We have established until now that in our religion there is a very strong recommendation to become a very strong and good generalist before we become a specialist, an expert. We saw the ahadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam and others telling us that first we should start by acquiring the best of what every field of knowledge and science has to offer, without going into depth, and too much depth, and too much expertise, and too much specialization. You start by knowing what every field and discipline has to offer that is the best and most relevant for you. Then you may start specializing after that, and we talked about some of the benefits of having that approach. Then we had a whole discussion around the idea of prioritization and selection. There is too much knowledge to know. It's too complex, it's too deep, it's too abundant, as we refer to it. And so therefore we have to prioritize. We have to be selective in what we learn. First, we saw that there are multiple ahadith talking about the importance of prioritizing based on what is most beneficial. And here, the same thing can be said about the second point too. One, it is beneficial. Two, it provides an actual improvement or correction. So that's in general. Go for that which is more beneficial and what fixes. But secondly, to that, it's tailored to you, personalized to your situation. Not only what is most beneficial, but what is most beneficial to you specifically. That may be different than what is most beneficial to me, or what fixes me at this time may be different than what fixed me 2 years ago or 20 years from now. Correct? And so there is a portion of this that is personalized, tailored to each and every one of us. The third point is, and this is, I highlighted it today because we're going to build on this point specifically, the difficulty of overlooking the spiritual and religious dimension. As much as we are saying in this series that knowledge is going to go beyond, by the instructions of our religion, beyond religious knowledge. We will see that our religion will say, go and learn things that are not what we refer to as religious knowledge. We're going to see that this is the point we're trying to highlight, that it is always intertwined with religious understanding, with a religious foundation, with religious knowledge. Some knowledge is necessary, obligatory, while other important and useful. And so we already saw many ahadith making those distinctions, that there are types of knowledge that are absolutely necessary for you, other ones that are important, but they're not necessary. And so that opens a discussion that inshallah today we are going to wrap up. That you have to prioritize based on what allows you to be the most submitted to God. So that becomes a general principle. That you have to prioritize the knowledge that you learn based on your immediate needs, based on your specific duties and responsibilities. And we talked about all of this. Based on what your heart and spirituality need. We see that we're sliding again into the spiritual and the religious. To know yourself, to focus on what is the long term. And we said this means in this world long term as well as beyond this world long term. We saw the linkages, and we talked at length about this earlier in the series, the linkages with the link with action. That none of this knowledge is supposed to be acquired just so that we accumulate data and information. All knowledge is supposed to be something you translate into action. Otherwise, this is not considered Islamic knowledge, as we made clear earlier. And the importance of focusing on the outcome. The outcome is what is going to tell you what was the fruit of this knowledge. When you acquired it, what did it provide? What's the outcome or the output of that knowledge? And the importance of autonomy. And so part of my directing principles now, when I go and acquire knowledge, I should have this in mind. I can see this as the process, I can see this as the outcome or my objective. When I acquire knowledge, I want to be autonomous. I want to think for myself. I want knowledge that allows me and teaches me, enables me to think for myself, not to constantly be dependent on others for my thinking, not to be constantly dependent on others for my actions. We saw a hadith around this, and this can apply to religion. This can apply beyond religion to my life in general as an individual, and this can also apply to us as communities, as societies. What type of knowledge allows me to be self-sufficient so that I don't constantly have to go to others, to be dependent on others? I have to be able to generate my own knowledge, my own interpretation of knowledge, as a person and as a society. The general effect of knowledge is much more important than the type of knowledge. So until now, this should be clear. Based on everything we've covered, our religion is telling us that the effect that the knowledge has on me as a person or as a community is more important than looking at what type of knowledge, what label I want to put beside the knowledge, whether this is called finance or biology or akhlaq. Before I get to that, it's what is going to be the effect of this knowledge for me? How transformative is it? How much of an improvement is it going to give me? This is much more important than the type of knowledge that it is. Then, last time that we met, we focused on 2 more points as part of our general principles. The first one is the importance of depth. And we saw the hadith from Imam Ali alayhi salam telling us that there is no good that comes out of worship or reciting the Quran or performing acts of worship or if it does not include the much deeper layer, the outcome that is supposed to be the intent behind these things. That I worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but there is no fear of God. That I read or recite the Quran, but there is no reflection on the meanings of what I'm reciting or an ability to translate that into my life. Imam Ali alayhi salam says there's no good in that type of recitation or that type of worship or that type of fiqh. Correct? The second point that we covered was that, so that we don't come back to it and have to repeat it, that experience is a form of knowledge by itself. And everything we're talking about does not necessarily mean that this is the type of knowledge that you acquire with someone like me sitting here talking to you. Not all knowledge has to be theoretical. Not knowledge is supposed to be something that you learn from a book or from a lecture. A lot of knowledge can be acquired through experience, by living through and learning from your own experience or the experience of others. Experience by itself is a form of knowledge and a valid form of knowledge, and we saw multiple ahadith talking about this the last time that we met. So today, inshallah, building on all of this, we start moving towards what we are calling religious knowledge. So the first type of knowledge, specific type of knowledge that we want to start talking about is religious knowledge. We start with reminders. The points that we want to mention, and we will get to that eventually today, we're not starting with this, but the outcome of what we will start with will lead us to this, is that what we call religious knowledge is everywhere and everything. For someone who is a true believer, or someone who truly understands the structure of the knowledge that we acquire when we're good Muslims, we start to understand that your Islamic knowledge becomes the lens through which you experience life. The lens through which you understand and interpret reality. This is what's going to tell you who you are. This is what's going to become the foundation that allows you to experience your life. This is a very different understanding of religious knowledge than saying Islam tells you learn how to read Quran, how to perform your prayer, how to perform your fast, how to perform your Hajj. Yes, that will come, and we will talk about that, and that's why I'm leaving that to the second lecture on religious knowledge next time, inshallah. Here we're focused on the religious knowledge that we are referring to as foundational. Everything you experience through life is now going to be through a lens. That lens is religion. It tells you who you are. It gives meaning to you, to your relationships with others, to your relationship with yourself, to your relationship with God, your relationship with nature, your relationship with history. Where do you fit in? Who are you? Where are you going in life? All of those meanings are going to come from the foundational structure that we are referring to here in this lecture as religious knowledge. We're not going in depth. If we need to, we'll see. Perhaps next lecture we start with a little bit more detail around this. But I think the point is clear, and we will clarify it inshallah a little bit later. We already mentioned the following points, so this is the reminder. Difficult to overlook the spiritual and religious aspect. Because of this way of understanding what religion is, that it forms your entire worldview, your entire identity, the foundation for how you experience reality, then no matter what you look at afterwards, what type of knowledge you look at, that knowledge can never be completely disconnected from the foundation that is religion. Even though it may look like it's disconnected. When you study biology or finance or history or language, it may look like it's disconnected. But the stronger your foundation is in religious knowledge, the more you're going to see that this has a very specific place in the general foundation. How it fits into the bigger picture of who you are and what your worldview is. All of the other points, inshallah, they're clear. I won't mention all of those. A few points that we already mentioned: the importance of intention, the importance of action, the importance of depth. All of this we have already covered. Inshallah, they're clear. The second point, inshallah, we want to cover today. Religious knowledge falls on different levels of obligation. And this is where we're going to start. We have been talking about what religion instructs us to learn. Does it instruct us to learn this to the same level of obligation? Clearly no. Because we have been talking about prioritizing. Saying that one thing is more of a priority than other. One thing has more importance or more urgency than another. So where does that fall under the general levels of obligation? So we need to talk about that. And then finally, this is the remarks or, the latest as we look at Islamic law, Islamic scholarship. This is slightly more technical, but I think still very useful and relevant for all of us to understand where some of the thinking and scholarship in understanding Islamic law and Sharia and how to apply our religion to real life, where has the thinking gone to see how some of our scholars are linking the realities of today's world with Islamic scholarship with what we have been talking about until now. And the idea of prioritization. So first points first. When I look at everything that becomes a human act or a human decision, that I will do or not do something, there is the detail of what I'm doing, and then there's the general category in which it falls. In Islam, in general, everything I could think of will fall in one of 5 categories, and those should be known and clear to all of us. The first category is the category of what is obligatory. That is wajib. And here we have many examples. For instance, my 5 daily prayers. Or that I have to fast the holy month of Ramadan unless there are exceptions that apply to me. That I have to perform the pilgrimage once in my lifetime. If I am in a situation where I feel that there is a life that requires saving, a human being is about to die in front of me, there is an obligation that I go and rescue this human being. If I have family members, I have a father, I have a mother, I have a spouse, I have a child, I have obligations. These are all the same level of wajib. Correct? I'm putting the category of wajib here, of obligatory, necessary actions that are binding to the person. For instance, certain acts of charities, they become entirely obligatory, including zakah, including khums, including others. These are wajib, acts of charity. When we look at the wajib and what is obligatory, there is a lot of categories, and I didn't want to turn this into a fiqh discussion. But of course, there are a lot of conditions that change a situation and that change the way we look at an act, whether it is obligatory. Not all obligations are of the same type. For instance, there are things that are obligatory by themselves, for themselves. That I perform a prayer, my ritual 5 prayers every day, this is an act that is obligatory for itself. period. But in order to perform the prayer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells me I have to be in a state of purity that is acquired through a wudu. Is the wudu wajib? No. It is not an act that is obligatory for itself, by itself. But it becomes obligatory if I have to perform my salah. There is no other way for me to perform my salah except to acquire this type of purity. So this purity becomes obligatory for another reason. For another obligatory act, this becomes obligatory. Okay? I mentioned these, by the way, because I want you to think about knowledge and how all of that works for us as individuals and how all of that works for us as communities. That sometimes the thing in itself, by itself, may not look like it's obligatory or necessary, but it might become obligatory and necessary because it will allow me to do something else, and that one, there is no question about it that it is obligatory or necessary. In any case, sincerity or not, we have acts of worship that require an intent of sincerity. For instance, when I stand to perform my prayer, I have to, and that's why many of us are taught this from a young age, to say قُرْبَةً إِلَى اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. I perform this act of worship so that I may reach proximity and nearness to God. This is my intent. My intent is that this is an act sincerely devoted to God. But we also have acts that are obligatory, where whether there is a sincere intent or not, the act is still valid and it remains obligatory whether you have the intent or not. I'm sitting here and I see a child that's about to drown in the pool. Do I have to take a moment and think about what my intent is before rescuing that child? And if I don't, I might think, but I'm only doing this to show off that I'm an incredible human being and I'm a hero and everybody's going to like me. And that's my only reason for rescuing that child. Should I stop doing that action? No. Does that invalidate the act or the obligation of the act? No. Sincerely to God or not, regardless, I still have to do that act. And that act is valid. Not every act that is obligatory requires an intent of sincerity. For instance, there are acts that are temporal. That is, it becomes obligatory in a specific time, and it's not obligatory outside of that time. And in some cases, you may catch up on the time that you missed, and sometimes you don't. That's also one type of obligation. It is not always obligatory. It depends on the circumstances. It depends on the time. Right now, as we're sitting here, Salat al-Fajr is not obligatory on us, because Salat al-Fajr has a specific time. It only becomes obligatory once we enter that time. Outside of that time, it is no longer obligatory. Performing the Hajj, fasting the holy month of Ramadan. We have cases where an act is obligatory upon every individual. And we have acts that are obligatory collectively. So that if it is sufficiently performed by the collectivity, it is no longer obligatory upon every individual. As we sit here and people enter, and some people say Salamun Alaykum as they enter, there is a collective obligation, it is wujub, that at least one person answers every person who says Assalamu Alaikum with an equivalent salam. If none of us do it, law says, Islamic law says, we have all done wrong. There's an obligation that we have all unfulfilled. We have all dishonored. If one of us steps up and responds, it is no longer an obligation on any of us. One person will carry the responsibility for everyone. This is the case of salam. One salam can be answered by one salam. If all of us answer, great, we all get a reward for answering. But the first person who answered is the one who got the reward for carrying the obligation for everybody else. No one else needs to do anything. This can work for the salam, but sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes there are things that require a lot more support, a lot more leadership from many more in the community, many more in society. One person answering, one person stepping up is not enough. You need a group. You need to reach a threshold. You need to reach a critical mass so that it changes reality. This is all part of collective obligation. If we don't reach that, we are all in a situation of shortcoming. If enough of us reach that, we have all been considered to have honored the obligation and fulfilled it. There's a lot of situations that are very technical, individual. One of the obligations in an Islamic community, for instance, is for instance, a Muslim passes away, that someone performs the rites of death. That they wash the person, that they perform the prayers for the person. And usually it takes more than one person to do it. If you have 2, 3, 5 people who do that, that's enough. The community has done the minimal requirement. If no one steps up, someone has passed away and no one knows, a Muslim passes away and no one is stepping up, even though we know that this person has passed away, and no one is stepping up to perform this, this is a shortcoming on the entire community. Okay, we continue with the rest of the discussion. Keep this idea of the individual versus the collective in mind. The second category is the category of al-mustahab or al-mandub. Mustahab means that these are acts that are required or very important or recommended, but not obligatory. So you're still being pushed by religion to do them, but it is no longer binding. So that if you do not do it, you do not get what is called ithm. It's not considered a sin that you have not done these acts. For instance, all of our acts of invoking God, dua, or acts of ziyarah, when we perform ziyarah, when we give acts of charity that are not obligatory, helping anyone. Charity could be with your time, with your money, with your effort, with anything. The 2 calls to prayer, al-adhan and al-iqamah. Any supplementary act of worship, usually we call them nawafil, whether they're prayers or anything else. Salat al-layl, tahajjud, any of those acts. The remembrance formulas, tasbih, tahmeed, tahleel, you say Allahu Akbar, Alhamdulillah, Subhanallah, Astaghfirullah. To remain in a state of purity all the time. You're always on wudu, you're always pure, as though you are always ready to be worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your manners with others, usually they fall in this category. Are you a pleasant person? Are you polite? Are you respectful? Do people want to be with you? Are you helpful? Example, how are you with your neighbors? Very strong recommended acts, but recommended, not obligatory. Acts of service. There are countless ahadith related to the importance, the value that our religion gives to providing service to others. Finding things, reasons where you can help others, provide any service to them. There are all sorts of instructions in our religion related to how we should dress, how we should eat, how we should walk, how we should sleep, how we should laugh, and so on and so forth. All of this falls under recommended, encouraged acts, aspects of religion. We move to the makruh, on the other side now. acts that are discouraged. So these are acts that are clearly considered undesirable by our religion. So here, for instance, we could start with the list that we just provided and say, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing that is desirable and encouraged. You know someone needs help and you do not help. We could say that this is mubah, this is neutral, or it may fall under makruh. It depends on the level of help required and how easy or not is it for you. Lacking manners, example, eating. In quality and quantity. What are you eating and how much of it are you eating and how are you eating it? There's all sorts of instructions in our religion about this. I gave as an example. It is very discouraged by the Imams of Ahl al-Bayt, for instance, to eat horse meat. Is it forbidden? No. But it is very discouraged. For instance, quantity. We have many ahadith saying that when we eat, we should estimate the size of our stomach and divide it into 3, and so that a third of the stomach is for solid foods, and a third is for liquids, and a third is for air. Drinking, speaking, laughing, and so on and so forth. Earning excessive profits. When you are in a business, do you need to absolutely maximize every cent and every dollar of every person and every interaction? No. So it is discouraged to earn what is considered excessive profits, especially if you are dealing with people who are believers. If you don't need to earn that, or you know that something is not worth that much, don't sell it for that much. Whether it's a service, whether it's a product, there's a lot of instructions around all of this. Causing discomfort or fear to animals. I'm about to slaughter an animal. I'm not supposed to show the other animals that I'm about to slaughter that animal, so that other animals do not fear. I do not cause stress to them. I do not cause discomfort to them. Speaking during the call to prayer. Colorful ihram. Are you allowed to wear an ihram when you go to Hajj that is not white? Yeah, you're allowed. But it's discouraged. It's makruh. Sleeping between dawn and sunrise. Dawn is Fajr, the crack of dawn, when the adhan of Salat al-Fajr is called, the call to adhan. We have a lot of ahadith that say this is what ruins people's lives, and if they knew how much livelihood and sustenance and rizq and money and wealth and success they would get in life if they would just not sleep between at-tulu'ain, tulu' al-fajr and tulu' al-shams, right? The break of dawn and sunrise, those hours where we can perform Salat al-Fajr, to stay awake during that time, to do something productive, to do something especially related to your spirituality, but not necessarily, to stay up during that time. In any case, so sleeping during that time is makruh, it's discouraged. And then we have the muharram or the haram, the things that are forbidden. So of course, going through the list, we start with those things that were obligatory. Not doing the things that are obligatory is your first haram. Your first forbidden or prohibited act is not doing what was on the list of the things that are obligatory. Lying, stealing, cheating, riba, so backbiting, slandering others, causing discord amongst people, envy, jealousy, earnings from haram. Any act of haram that leads to profits, those profits are considered haram money. This is considered illicit, forbidden money. Do not touch it and stay away from it. Leading to haram. There are things that you do that are not haram in themselves, but they may be leading to haram. That is also considered haram. Any act that is a condition to a wajib is a wajib. Any act that is a condition to haram is haram. These are general rules in Islamic law. So for instance, we also have situations where it depends. It depends what is the intent. As a general rule in Islam, you will be told there are things you cannot have any transactions with. You're not supposed to transact in, for instance, selling or making money of things that are impure. A dog, a pig, blood. Blood is considered impure. Can you sell blood? The general rule, no. Yeah, but people need this because this is going to save lives. Then it becomes maybe obligatory, not only encouraged. It might be obligatory to find the blood and to sell the blood. Or for instance, selling grapes. Haram? Absolutely not. But 100% you are being told, I'm buying these grapes to make wine. It becomes haram. The act in itself is not a problem, but now that you know that this is being used as a condition to something that is forbidden, it becomes forbidden. Money earned from that becomes illicit. If you don't know, you don't know. But if you know, you're supposed to stay clear. Then we have the category that is called mubah. So here I added what we can consider neutral. Let's say perhaps the easiest way to translate it. Acts that are neutral. You're not being encouraged. You're not being discouraged. It is not binding. So what's left? What's left is the rest. So here I wrote it's permissible. But everything that is makruh is also permissible. Everything that is discouraged is also permissible. It's allowed. You may do the thing that is, you may sleep between, the crack of dawn and sunrise. Is it allowed and permissible? Yes, it is. It's discouraged, but it's permissible. So here I wrote it's permissible or it's allowed in the strict sense. In the sense that what's left, what has been excluded from everything else, what's left are the things that are supposed to be entirely neutral. For instance, the examples they might give here is, for instance, you feel like walking right now. You feel like drinking a glass of water. Is it encouraged? No. Is it discouraged? No. Haram? Forbidden? Binding in any way? No. You may do it. All of that is supposed to fall under mubah, or the permissible allowed acts. And here we can add, speaking with a friend, wearing this or that color, etc. A couple of notes here. The first one is that there is a whole discussion on the use of what is mubah and what is not that is much more technical. In what sense? In the sense that we have a school of thought that considers what is mubah or neutral to be the default position in Islam. If this is what you start with as your default position as a scholar, then you're going to rely on the texts and the hadith that tell you everything is basically permissible to you until proven otherwise. Everything's fair game. Everything falls in this category until you have a solid proof that it doesn't. This is not the position of every scholar, by the way. There's another default position that is everything is forbidden until you have an exception that says that it is not. And these become very different schools of Islamic law and Islamic thought. In any case, the second point I think is the more interesting one, and this is a point that is often taught in akhlaq, in Islamic spirituality, and many scholars do mention this one way or another. We just presented 5 categories. 2 of them are binding, 2 of them are very recommended or not recommended. And then we took everything else and we put it in this 5th category. And we said it's neutral. But the scholars of akhlaq, of spirituality, they tell us that really when you think about it, there isn't anything that we should be putting in this last category. Everything that we do, we should be able to say, does this bring me a little bit closer to God or a little bit further away from God? Does this make me a better person or not? Does this improve my state? Is this something desirable in the eyes of God or not? How I'm about to spend my money, my effort, my time, my energy, my attention, whatever it may be. Is this something that God wants to see me do or not? Even if it's drinking water, even if it's going for a walk. And here is where the whole situation changes with my intent. The walk can turn into an act of worship. If I intend from this act to be healthier for the sake of God, to take better care of my body for the sake of God, that act of worship, that act that should not be an act of worship, just became an act of worship. When I eat, when I drink, when I sleep, even the things that bring me great joy and entertainment and happiness and pleasure in life, all of these can now fall in this category. You just change it with your intent, with your awareness that God is there, that He has allowed this to happen, that He has given you the energy and the conditions and the circumstances and to enjoy this. You can turn this into an act for God. And then you are no longer in the mubah and the indifferent and in the completely neutral. You've turned it into at least a recommended act, and into an encouraged act. Okay, so this was a quick introduction. When we take this, we can apply it to knowledge. So the prioritization that we've been talking about, all of this applies to prioritization. How do I prioritize knowledge? If we're saying that everything I do in my life as a Muslim has to fall into these 5 categories, then this needs to apply to my thinking about knowledge. Knowledge should also fall into these 5 categories. So if we apply this to knowledge, we start from the beginning. Wajib, obligatory. What types of knowledge will become obligatory? Well, all the knowledge that I need to perform the obligatory acts that I just mentioned. I have to at least have enough knowledge to be able to perform the obligatory acts. I have to know what is obligatory upon me, and I have to know how to perform it. So it starts with necessary religious knowledge. And we will start with, starting next lecture inshallah, we will start with belief in God. And we will see that the hadith don't give us a choice to know God. Now, knowing God can be something very superficial, very minimal. If that's all I need, okay, no issue. Or it can become something very specialized and very deep, and I do for my whole life. That I study God and His attributes, tawheed, and so on and so forth. All of those are knowing God. But there's an amount that is certainly obligatory. Knowing the Holy Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, peace upon them. Life after death. Necessities of religion. And we just went through a number of them. Performing the obligations. Awareness of major sins. All of this has to be part of what I consider obligatory. Secondly, performing acts without harming others. So for instance, now I'm a doctor and I'm about to perform surgery. Our scholars say, I am now in a position where I may be harming others with the responsibility and the work that I do. So it is a religious obligation to acquire all the knowledge I need so that others are not harmed by what I'm about to do. I don't know if that's clear. That applies to every situation. I become an engineer, I work in finance, I become whatever you could think of, that has an effect on people's lives, people's livelihoods, people's properties, people's health, people's children, people's minds. If there is a way for me to do things the wrong way, and this causes others harm, and of course not all harm is the same, but it causes others harm, I need to have enough knowledge to know how I will cause that harm and how to avoid it. That is part of what is obligatory knowledge for me now. Because I'm in a position where I have a lot more power than someone else. I'm in a situation where I can do the surgery, someone else is not. So hopefully I have received the right training and the right knowledge and the right experience to lead to all of this. But sometimes life is strange. And I find myself in a situation where I have a lot more power without necessarily having all the knowledge that should have come with it. That happens a lot too. Secondly, when we look at the community, we can apply the same type of thinking. Everything we've said until now is focused on the individual. What about the community? Perhaps collectively, since we said that, there are obligations that are at the collective level. Just like when someone enters the room and they say salam. This is a collective obligation for one person at least to respond. At the level of the community, there is an obligation upon every community to have access to advanced knowledge in religion. Every community has to find a way, has to have a way to have a deeper understanding of religion. A deeper understanding, a technical, specialized, expert understanding of the Holy Quran, of fiqh, Islamic law, and whatever else that community may need from religious knowledge. So here are some examples. For instance, beliefs. As a community, there has to be enough expertise in the community in beliefs. What do we believe in? Why do we believe in it? What are the arguments? What are the proofs? What are the big questions? How do we answer them? The Holy Quran, and that's a huge field. Islamic law. The Arabic language to the extent that it's required to understand religion. Seerah and Sunan, to have enough knowledge of how did the Prophet live? What happened in his life? What is applicable or not in his life or the lives of Ahlul Bayt to our lives? An ability to perform, at least to a certain extent, the duties of a judge that should exist within a community. You should be able to go to someone to reach a resolution of some disputes between people because of business, because of family ties, because of conflict, because of whatever. Do you have that ability or not? Death rituals. I mentioned death rituals. There's a collective obligation upon the community that we at least know what to do if one of us, wal-'iyadhu billah, one of us passes away. What do we do? What do we do first? What do we do second? Who does it? What are the conditions? So on and so forth. Understanding inheritance law. After this person has passed away, what happens to everything they have left behind? Who does it go to? How is it split up? Family law, and so on and so forth. These are considered obligations, obligatory, wajib upon a community of people. If you're living all alone in the woods, completely disconnected, or somewhere where there are no other Muslims, fine. But the moment you are now multiple people, numerous people, you have to look around and say, have we met these basic needs of our community or not? If not, we have to find a way to meet these. Today the world is a lot easier. We have the internet and we have ways to connect to those who are outside, but even that is not always easy or possible. And a lot of this still has to be done in person, in any case. Then beyond religion. As a community, when you go back to the older books at least, it is very clear that every community has to have all the essentials to sustain itself. All the scholars, all the jurists agree on this. So the community, for instance, has to have enough expertise in medicine, has to have enough expertise to build its own houses, to deal with those who are sick, to fix their cars or the equivalent of their cars, to deal with the necessities of life. I listed some here, but there's so much more. The community has to have enough people who understand agriculture, to grow their own food, security, economics, enough teachers, mechanics, lawyers, politicians, banking, finance. There was no dispute or disagreement about this in the past, by the way. This is a matter of consensus. In any case, we can come back to this later. Applied to knowledge, mustahab and mandub. So again, acquiring additional, now that I go to the types of knowledge that are perhaps not obligatory, but at least strongly encouraged. So anything that is beyond what is strictly obligatory is going to fall in the category of what is encouraged. This is additional bonus, right? So for instance, acquiring additional religious knowledge, achieving expertise in any area of religious knowledge, memorizing the Quran, Tailoring to circumstantial needs. Your ability to take what religion says and say, how does this apply to the circumstances of my life or the circumstances of my community? This is something that was applicable 14 centuries ago. How does it work for us today? We know that it's good. How do we make it work? Knowledge of manners and supplementary acts of worship. To know those things, this is all recommended. You need to? No. But it's really good to know. And then, of course, teaching others. And this is beyond what is obligatory. Here we're saying there are enough people teaching. There is some teaching going on so that if people are looking for the information, religious information, they can find it. So beyond that, if you perform teaching duties of religious sciences, this is encouraged. This is good. If no one is teaching anyone anything, then this is a huge shortcoming. If there is a need for the teaching to happen and it's not happening, that would fall under the obligatory. Acquiring beneficial worldly knowledge to improve the self, to improve the state of others, to serve the community, to serve humanity, to achieve excellence in anything, all of that would be, at the individual level, very recommended knowledge to acquire. At the community level, organizing, supporting religious research, expertise, teaching, spreading, outreach, knowledge related to any of that is very strongly encouraged for a community. Beyond that, so this is still religious knowledge. Focusing on the immediate needs of the community. And every community has different needs than another community. For example, it would be really good for communities to have a proper plan for how charity is to be distributed. To find people who have actual needs and make sure that charities reach them. For instance, the leadership and management of community centers. This is perhaps really encouraged, important types of knowledge to acquire. To make sure that that knowledge exists within the community. If it doesn't, we should go get it. How should we run our community centers? What's the most efficient, effective way? What are some lessons learned that we can learn from other types of community centers or religious centers or churches or others? There is an Islamic component to this. There is another component that has to do with, for instance, being a minority in complex, hyper-developed countries. How does it work? What should we be careful about? How should we run it? And then we can add to this, for instance, areas like counseling, conflict resolution, social work, feminine medicine and care, pedagogy and child education. All of these should be strategic priorities of our communities. This is not things that we should leave to chance and randomness, and maybe it will happen and maybe not. These are real needs of every community. This is not something that may happen. We know it will happen. We know these needs exist. The last point, community supporting worldly knowledge acquisition to enhance well-being, socioeconomic status. So this is a completely non-religious. We're now going even beyond. Enhance our well-being, the well-being of the community or society at large. Socioeconomic status. Improving the state of everyone in the community. What do we teach people so that they have better lives? We should think about that as a community for everyone who belongs and is a member of that community. Political representation, scientific, technological, industrial, leadership, development. Of course, these are prioritized, the list. Before we get to this, there are other priorities. Then we go to the makruh, the undesirable types of knowledge for ourselves. Knowledge and skills required to work. Our religion mentions areas that it discourages people to work in. As an absolute, no. Is it forbidden? Absolutely not. That's not what we're saying. But we have many ahadith saying it's preferable not to work in these fields. One of the fields, for instance, is working in money. where you constantly have money and you're counting money and your whole life is about money. Money growing, money shrinking, there is more of it, exchanging it, and so on and so forth. That by itself is discouraged as a field of specialization and day-to-day work. In the business of death, to the point where, for instance, people who work in the shrouds, in the kafan, the cloth that you use to wrap the deceased in, it's makruh to work in that. Is it necessary? Of course, someone in the community has to do it. But it's discouraged. To be in the business of death is discouraged. To be a butcher is discouraged. Is it required? Absolutely. We need someone in the community who's a butcher. But in the riwayat, for instance, it's discouraged because it makes the heart hard. It hardens the heart. That you're constantly surrounded by death and you're butchering animals and blood and so on and so forth. You lose the sensitivity. This is discouraged. We want people to remain sensitive. We don't want you to lose that sensitivity. Anything that is haram adjacent, as I called it here, haram adjacent and questionable. There are things that are not haram, but you yourself have questions about them. In general, discouraged. Anything that may harm your reputation, in general, discouraged. You don't need to. Nothing is pushing you. Nothing is forcing you. Stay away from these things. There's no need to enter into those areas and fields. Anything that is a waste of time, discouraged. Anything that is trivial entertainment. Anything that feeds arrogance, selfishness, argumentation, showing off, controversy for controversy's sake, that can lead to misleading others, to manipulating others, to pressuring others. All of these are types of knowledge, by the way. You can study psychology for this, you can study hacking for this, you can study all sorts of things. But a lot of this, by the way, is going to be related to what? It's going to be related to the intent. And that's why you have it at the bottom of the page. Intent, intent, intent. What's the intent from learning this? And I'm going to come back to it in a second. Then as a community, when we're thinking about knowledge, emphasizing distraction and less over more important. There are things that are less important and things that are more important. As a community, what are we prioritizing? Again, this should not be random. This should not happen by itself. We should sit and think and have deliberate discussions and decisions on what is important for our community. What is our priority? Are there things that are distracting us from those priorities? Not bringing attention, not bringing awareness to things that we consider to be dangerous to our communities, where we know we need to raise awareness of those things. This is a shortcoming. This falls under makruh. That there are shortcomings, there are risks. The risks could be health. I wrote a few here. Health, hyper-consumerism, politics, what is going on politically and how it could affect our lives, social trends, and the list goes on. And then there are things that happen within the community that lead to things, these are just examples, lead to things like cliques, socio-economic cliques. People come together because of the type of work they do, the social class they belong to, whatever it may be. We should be aware of this and we should work against it so that it does not become the norm and something we all accept. There should be knowledge around this. And then, of course, all of this, remember, intent, intent, intent. Muharram or haram. Are there types of knowledge that are forbidden in Islam? Again, bottom of the page, intent. But, yes, there are things that are listed as haram types of knowledge. The first one is, if the knowledge you are acquiring leads to haram actions, then it is haram. And so I wrote the rule here. Anything that leads to haram is haram. Just like anything that leads to wajib is wajib. If I cannot do the wajib without it, then that becomes a wajib if I can put it in place. Like performing the wudu to perform a salah. The wudu becomes wajib. Then there are areas that are listed as falling under haram explicitly. So, for instance, I'm going to mention a few here and then I'll come back with a caveat. Sorcery, magic, fortune telling, occult rituals, knowledge of how to perform theft, how to perform fraud, how to perform gambling, how to create and use and sell intoxicants and drugs, how to produce and make money off of immoral content, how to perform spying of others, and so on and so forth. These are listed and you can clearly link them to specific types of knowledge and potentially ways of earning money and so on and so forth. And then as a community, what becomes forbidden is, for instance, normalizing this. That we sit together and encourage each other to do this. Or we consider it normal. It's okay, and I don't react knowing that you do that, and I tell you nothing. I don't discourage you, I don't remind you, I don't warn you. It's okay that you do something haram or that I do something haram, and slowly and with time, we all start to do it. I may even encourage you to do it. Okay. So if I may here, I'll just tell a little story and perhaps we'll try to wrap it up soon after. We covered about half of what I wanted to cover, but it's okay. This is a verse in the Quran, in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 102. It's a story. We could spend a long time on this story, but given the time, let's keep it short. We read it in Arabic and then we repeat in English. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah tells us of this specific story. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ عَلَى الْمَلَكَيْنِ بِبَابِلَ هَارُوتَ وَمَارُوتَ وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ فَلَا تَكْفُرْ فيتعلمون منهما ما يفرقون به بين المرء وزوجه وما هم بضارين به من أحد إلا بإذن الله ويتعلمون ما يضرهم ولا ينفعهم ولقد علموا لمن اشتراه ما له في الآخرة من خلاق ولبئس ما شروا به أنفسهم لو كانوا يعلمون. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they instead followed the magic that is being recanted or recited or repeated or promoted by the devils against or during the reign of Sulaiman. I'm going to repeat and I'm going to explain the story after I read the verse. They instead followed the magic promoted or recanted by the devils during the reign of Sulaiman or against the reign of Sulaiman. Never did Sulaiman disbelieve. Sulaiman is a prophet, Sulaiman alayhi salam, Solomon. Never did Sulaiman disbelieve. Rather, it is the devils who disbelieved. They taught sorcery to the people, along with what had been sent down to the two angels in Babel, Harut and Marut. The two angels never taught anyone without saying, "We are only a test for you, a trial for you, so do not turn to disbelief." Yet, they would learn from them that which would cause separation between one and their spouse. But they did not harm anyone with it except by God's permission. And they would learn that which harmed them and brought them no benefit, knowledge that whosoever purchases it has no share in the afterlife. Evil is that for which they sold their souls, had they but known. The verse is perhaps not entirely clear, so it deserves a bit of a retelling of the story. Clearly, the verse is talking openly about sorcery and magic. And this is, by the way, there are many mentions, dozens of mentions of sorcery or magic in the Holy Quran. And there are instances in which clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explains that what is happening is being called and referred to as sorcery and magic when it is not. It's trickery. And then there are a few verses in the Quran that seem to indicate that it has a real effect. And this verse is one of them. There's something real happening here. To the point where there are people who are using it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us one example of what they were doing, and clearly they were doing much more. It was affecting people to the point where they can separate between spouses. They make people leave each other who are spouses, or today we would call it destruction of the family. They were using their magic and sorcery for that. Okay. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about sorcery, magic. What's the story? In short, we're told that during the time of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam things that today we would say are not normal. But it seems that a lot of not normal was happening during the time and the reign of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. Perhaps there is a reason why he prayed and asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have this type of kingdom and this type of power and this type of reign. That could have been maybe the only way to counter what was happening. In any case, we're told that Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was surrounded by people who were using magic and sorcery. And they were relying on works to do this. They had works, they had books, let's refer to them. They had works that they relied on to perform all of this. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam put an end to all of that, and then he seized all of their works, all of their books, and he hid them away from the people. And then time went by, and Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam passed away. Then people started to look for those works, and they were able to find them. And then some people starting to use them again. And then they started to spread rumors. And they started to say and convince people that if Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam had any kingdom and any power and any reign, it was only because he had those works. And he himself was using magic and sorcery and every other device that they were using now to have power and to have reign and to have a kingdom. And so people started to completely leave religion. At that time, this is the Jews. And so they started to leave religion, to leave their Torah, to leave their divine instructions, and to follow these people. And this continued, seemingly, I'm going to add now, until the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise, why is God talking about this to the Holy Prophet who is now in Medina? There were still a lot of Jews in Medina, with very known tribes, very powerful. And if you read Surah Al-Baqarah carefully, the first chapter revealed in Medina after the Holy Prophet moves to Medina, you have to create linkages between what is mentioned in it and the reality that the Holy Prophet is confronted with. So we have to assume that there is some of that happening at the time of the Holy Prophet ﷺ. That people are still dealing with and using sorcery and magic, to put bluntly. And then beyond that, at that time, the time of the Holy Prophet, the Jews had convinced people that Prophet Sulaiman was not really a prophet or a good person, because of this idea that he had entirely relied on, call it black magic, sorcery, whatever, to become who he is and to have the kingdom that he has. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Holy Prophet, and they reacted, by the way, during the time of the Holy Prophet, when he started to enumerate in his prophethood who the prophets before him were. So when he starts to list Adam and Nuh and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa, but he also lists Musa and Dawood and, right, Yaqub and Bani Israel with their prophets, they reacted. They did not want to accept Prophet Sulaiman as one of them. So the Holy Prophet now is coming to the defense of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, that he is truly a prophet of God. That what happened was not that Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was the one following black magic and sorcery and becoming a disbeliever. They instead followed, never did Sulaiman disbelieve. وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانَ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا. It's the devils who disbelieved. Who are the devils? The Quran uses this term, the devils, to refer to people or any other entity that does evil. There are other verses of the Quran that openly say shayateen al-jinni wal-ins. The shaitan may be from ins or jinn or any other entity. It may be a human being or something else. Any source of evil, the Quran is referring to it as a devil. So this is what the Quran here is saying. So it says that Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam is not the one who disbelieved or used this magic or used this sorcery. It is they who did. And what else did they do? They not only did that, but they also started to spread and use the magic from the time of the two angels, Harut and Marut in Babel. So there's more magic going on and more sorcery going on. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not give us a full story here. He just gives us a few glimpses of something that would have happened in Babel. What happened in Babel? Corruption, awful things would have happened. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent two angels to Babel to guide people and help them and teach them and rescue them. As part of that, there was magic and sorcery happening. The two angels that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I sent to the people, what did they do? They taught people how to use magic to undo the magic, to undo the sorcery. But they would tell people, don't use this in the wrong way. Don't lose faith in God. Remain believers, remain strong. This is like giving a knife in the hand of someone and telling them you can do good things with this and you can do bad things with this. Only do good things with this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and every time they taught anyone anything, they told them, وَمَا يُعَلِّمَانِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ حَتَّى يَقُولَا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ فِتْنَةٌ. We are here, this is something you have to consider as a test, as a trial. Don't fall. Don't fail in this test. But people took from them and they started to use it, and the Quran gives us one example. And so they started to use the magic they learned so that they separate between people, make people hate each other, and what we call, as I said, the destruction of the family. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this is how they spread all of this. Until the end of the verse. There's a lot here that becomes very, I think, relevant to our discussion. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the verse, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does this everywhere in the Quran, by the way, where there is any hint or indication that there is anything happening without the will or the laws or the sovereignty or the control of God. As soon as there might be something questioned, that someone is operating outside the will or the power or the might or the knowledge of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say something to say, no, this is the system I have created. These are the laws I put in place. I'm the one who's allowing this to happen. This is part of the system of this world. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala adds here that وَمَا هُمْ بِضَارِّينَ بِهِ مِنْ أَحَدٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. They could not have harmed anyone with any of this except by the will of God. This is still under the will of God. That's one thing to keep in mind since we're talking about things like sorcery and magic and so on and so forth. That's one. Two, in both stories, because here there are two stories in one verse. One story has to do with those who came right after Prophet Sulaiman, and one story that is happening with the people who abused of the knowledge given to them by the two angels. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about them two things. The first is that they knew what they were doing. These are not innocent people. They knew exactly what they were doing. And as you go lower in the verse, it says, and they sold their souls in exchange for this. It's very clear. The language is very clear. This is not metaphorical interpretation of the verse. وَلَقَدْ عَلِمُوا, the Quran says, and indeed they knew, لَمَنِ اشْتَرَاهُ مَا لَهُ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنْ خَلَاقٍ. They knew that whoever does this, they are buying this or selling this transaction with money. Whoever does this, they are losing their afterlife. They will have nothing left from their afterlife, and they still engaged in this. And then the Quran continues and it says, لَبِئْسَ مَا شَرَوْا بِهِ أَنفُسَهُمْ. This is the worst thing that no worse thing could have been used to sell in exchange for this than their souls. They gave their souls in exchange to be able to use this magic and sorcery. So these people knew what they were doing. Now a question. Why would Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, this whole story, let's go back to the beginning of it. Why would he seize the books and keep them? Today in our fiqh, the general rule is you're not even allowed to own these books. Why would Prophet Sulaiman keep these books? He knew what he was doing. This is a prophet of God. We believe he's infallible, he's wise, he has judgment, he's strategic, foresight. Why would he do that? It seems, just looking at the story this way, it seems that there is also a good that can come out from understanding what's in those books. Otherwise he would have destroyed them. But he kept them. Perhaps you need to know the knowledge in those books so that you can undo it. Perhaps you need to know the knowledge today in the world. If you don't understand what's going on with a venom or a poison, you don't know how to undo it. If you don't know how to build a bomb, you don't know how to undo it. If you don't know what's going on with this type of magic, you don't know how to undo it. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us a very clear case that even though we said there are things that are forbidden, there are things that you stay away from. There will be situations where that also becomes a little bit relative, or in fact necessary. And it depends on your intent. And it depends on what you are doing with it. If those against you are using it, you need to know what they're doing. You need to understand it enough so that you can at least undo it. This is pragmatic. This is realistic. So this is very clear in the story. There's a lot more that we can say, but it's getting late. So we will wrap it up with this. I just wanted to finish with perhaps this portion. We talked about 4 types of knowledge. When we applied the 5 categories, we mentioned 4 of them right now. We stopped at the muharram, the forbidden type of knowledge. That's why I mentioned the verse. The last one we didn't talk about is the mubah, the neutral. And I hinted to it a little bit earlier. Here, normally, we would say, for instance, any type of knowledge that would fall under what we can call like neutral hobbies. You just have a hobby. Sports. Here I wrote sports statistics. Always very impressive. Crafts, cooking, travel, and so on and so forth. All knowledge that is neither beneficial nor harmful. All would fall here, including, for instance, some areas of history. Interesting facts, you can recount all of that, but no practical benefit, interest, use to it. Literature, some science, so on and so forth. Skills, knowledge of certain skills, that you can do design, that you can do programming, that you know a lot about business, if it's not translating into something, an action, if it just stays random accumulation of data and information in your mind, all of that falls under neutral, permissible and allowed in the strict sense without specifically being something used or acquired with a good intent or a bad intent. If it does, then it falls under either discouraged or encouraged. So intent becomes huge here. The last point I'm going to mention, and we leave the second half of the lecture to the next time, inshallah, is a couple of books. I think I ended up just mentioning two. There's a lot more, but let's just mention two quickly. The first one is by Neil Postman. It's called Amusing Ourselves to Death. You'll notice both books are a little bit old, but the points they make are still relevant. The first one is Amusing Ourselves to Death. He talks about TV, but he's also writing in 1985. Today this would apply to all the rest of the technologies that we use. The book is Amusing Ourselves to Death. The point he's trying to make is not just that we are spending a lot of our lives, our time and our energy and our attention, and I've spoken at length about our attention and how we live today in an attention economy, where those who know are competing for every extra second of your attention. In any case, so he is not only talking about how much effort and time and energy and attention is going into entertainment that is not leading to anything more than just entertainment, or what he's calling amusement, amusing ourselves all the way to death. But he's criticizing the society that we have become. So at an individual level, okay, but as a society, he says we have lost the ability to truly think anything through in a sustained way, in a deep way, in a substantial way, because everything is amusement, everything is entertainment, everything is superficial and shallow, and it's only there for your entertainment, and you move on. Everything is a soundbite, everything is a short, and you move on. It has no depth. It's not authentically linked to something important for you. And this means that your whole life becomes something very shallow. Even the things that should matter, because they are presented to you in this format, they become shallow. They become amusement. So here he was talking about the TV. The TV being kind of the tool, the ideal tool, the perfect tool for amusement and entertainment. The topic should be important, but because it is going through that mechanism, it makes you lose the seriousness of what is being taught or what is being presented through that specific format. And it could be politics, and it could be social issues, it could be anything else. But you view it from only the point of entertainment and amusement. And this is a very real danger, by the way. That does not translate into real life. It's like it lives psychologically, we make it live into this other world, this virtual world of amusement and entertainment that I can spend time, energy, knowing about, looking at, but I move on. And it remains shallow, and it does not have any real linkages to my life. That's the point of that book. The second book is a novel, very well-known novel. And there are a few novels that would fall in this category, but this is perhaps a very clear one that I thought I would mention, The Brave New World Revisited. So his initial work, his initial novel was the 1932 one. It was just called A Brave New World. And until today you hear the expression, this is where it comes from. It's the title of that novel written by Aldous Huxley. So he wrote A Brave New World, and then he made modifications to it, and he called it Brave New World Revisited in 1958, and it was published again. And so he talks about this supposed to be utopic society where everything has been thought about and engineered. Every human being, every emotion, every act, everything has been thought for you engineered by others. Every aspect of that society is controlled. The point of the book is that this society from the outside, if you're looking at it, it would look almost perfect. To the point where you have full social stability, everyone looks like they are living a happy life. There is a complete absence of pain, of conflict, of dissatisfaction, or of strong emotions in that society. So he also talks about the drugs that have been invented in that society to create that state of mind. So from the outside it looks perfect. But all of this is written as a warning. So he's saying in that society, when the decisions are made, in that society everything has moved towards complete passivity. You're completely passive. Things just happen to you. And you just go along with them. Because you have lost all reason to resist anything. Everything is perfect, everything is stable, there is no conflict, there is nothing that dissatisfies you in any way. There is no need to compel you, to coerce you, to force you, to use violence against you. Nothing. None of that is required. So there is no reason for tyranny. Everything just works by itself on its own. Every decision is just accepted by you as the social masses. And so he emphasizes this point in the middle that I wrote. It's a society, he says, that is completely without any freedom. That's not a society that's choosing to be this way, by the way. And this is a society that has been pacified, brought to full absolute peace. How? By entertainment, pleasure, sports, and shallow amusement. And we need to think about this in our lives. How much of that is taking place? These are not novels written just to write novels, by the way. And this is, if you look at the time, this is in 1932 that he was writing this. I would say today, what you can get in terms of entertainment and amusement, you can't even compare in scale, in intensity, in reality to what he's talking about. So this is for awareness, that the more you know, the more you understand that this is a very real danger individually and collectively. That you have to heed this type of warning and not fall into it. You'll understand what it leads to. These, as I said, are deeper philosophical thoughts, but presented in the form of a novel or a story. I'm going to stop here. There's a lot more to cover, but inshallah we'll keep it to the next lecture. And if there are any questions, concerns, comments, then gladly we'll take any of them. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. وأنتم تفضلوا. الله يخليكم. Ahsantum. Excellent question. So the question is, in the past, in other formats and lectures, we've talked about how the imams would often surround themselves with, and at specific times in history, with people who seem to be very wealthy and very well off. And here we're talking about how it may be discouraged or makruh to work in money and exchange. So the difference here, or the distinction, is those people were not specialists and their jobs were not money. So today, this would apply to people, for instance, who are working in foreign exchange, stock market, banking, finance, whereas those people we were talking about were merchants, businessmen. They owned caravans of camels, and they allowed people to travel from land to land. They owned real estate properties, and they owned gardens, and they were into agriculture, were into all of these other areas, and their work was not money for money's sake. Money was the tool. Of course, all wealth at some point can be translated into money, but here we're talking about people whose entire work is only money. We're not looking beyond money. Money is not the instrument or the tool. It is the topic of the work. This is what is discouraged. So the issue here, when we say that's makruh, the makruh is not to have money. The makruh is to be a specialist in money. I wake up in the morning and I only think about the money, and I don't think, for instance, of the land or the animals or the agriculture or whatever business I'm in, because my business is money itself, right? This is what is considered discouraged. And again, I say it's discouraged and also entirely obligatory and necessary in every community. We're just saying that it's discouraged as if you have the choice, you don't need to specialize in this because it has effects on you. This is what really is behind all of this. And we could add to this a lot of other jobs. These are the ones I listed them because there are specific ahadith related to them. And perhaps later in the series, I'll mention some of these ahadith, just so that we know what's in the ahadith. And maybe for us to think about further, analyze further. Why would the Imams mention these specifically? Are there differences between what was going on in their times and today or not? Is it more about human nature? All of that. Inshallah, it's clear. Allah yakhlikum. Okay. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. وأنتم